Hey, it's Scott Barrett, and we're back with the burning truth. And I'm here once again with a man whose interview style has been compared to Porky after he passed away. It's Matt Burns, everybody.
Thanks, Scott. And I will say it's good to be here. It's good to be here. But I will say, it's been it's a great time. It's a great day. So how are you?
I'm all right, mate. I'm all right. I'm really excited about this one because we're going to get into an interview. Ladies and gentlemen, brace yourselves because tonight we are welcoming a man who laughs in the face of pain. He treats light tubes like pillows and considers barbed wire a minor inconvenience. He's the deathmatch daredevil, the hardcore hurricane, and quite possibly the only person who's ever thought, you know what this match needs? More blood. It's the one and only. It's Alton Thorne, everybody.
I think that's the best introduction I've had in at least a fortnight, mate. Good job.
You know what? I really wish I had like an applause background music at the same time. I'm going to figure that in for next time. We'll fix that in post. How are you, mate? You okay?
I'm very good, thank you, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for coming on and being our first interview on the regenerated Burning Truth. That's what we keep calling it because we keep bringing it back. And all the different bits and bobs that we do on the channel, interviewing, really exciting. And I'm glad you're all right. And I think we should just get straight into it, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about you. What kind of person wakes up one day and says, I fancy getting hit with light tubes for a living?
I don't think I ever directly had the thought I want to get hit by light tubes. I just think it comes with the genre. I suppose, yeah. I came from a pretty extreme family. My dad's like multi-martial artist, was a professional boxer when I was a kid. Used to do like endurance training courses, like where you'd have to carry giant logs through the woods with nothing on your feet, and just basically a crazy man, right? So I immediately had kind of craziness around me and this idea that like pain and fear are just things that are in the mind and that you can kind of just cope with them and put them to one side and push through. So I think a lot of it came from Dad, but he wanted me to be a boxer and I just didn't have any interest in being a boxer. I didn't like boxing training. It was too hard. I didn't like and he said, well, what do you want to do? Because you need to be able to defend yourself. Because he used to get bullied when he was a kid and he wanted me to be able to stick up for myself. And I was like, I want to do something like professional wrestling. So he made me do judo. For about a decade, I did judo and I absolutely loved it because basically a lot of it is professional wrestling. Like you get thrown, you're learning to break fall. That's just a bump, right? So I had crash mats at my disposal, and I was just like doing things that I'd seen on professional wrestling shows before the judo class, and then I'd do, some martial arts, go home, and so it was kind of always there. Like I always knew that it's a direction I wanted to move into. I just don't think I always realised that the options were there in this country to do it. Like I wasn't aware of schools and stuff. I ended up doing theatre rather than wrestling because I wanted to be performing in some way, and ended up going through uni and doing that. And eventually I found a school in Nottingham, and that's kind of where I thought, well, I've done the judo, that's like practicing falling over. I've done the acting, which is the performing side. Put the two together, become a professional wrestler.
Absolutely. I can see that all day. And I actually watched a previous interview that you'd done, and you talked about your nan, who was a big influence for you.
Yeah, well, this is actually like a massive part of my, like, who I am as a character and everything now, because my nan, I think she loved world of sport. Like she had multiple sclerosis and was in a wheelchair. And couldn't walk. And she used to, when I was a little kid, she used to sit me down she'd sit in her armchair and I'd sit in her wheelchair and we'd watch wrestling together. And I think that she'd kind of watched World of Sport, and when that ended, gone to car boot sales and bought loads of WWF VHS tapes.
Right, yeah.
So we'd have but the first one I remember is WrestleMania 4 in the double case, which had, I think, Hogan and Andre on the front. Yeah. So like she had loads of VHS, and it was all colours and like heroes and crazy people on the cover, and it was like nothing else in that video cabinet. And I was like, right, what is this? I want to watch this.
You pull them out. It's Hogan. It's Savage. It's Warrior.
Exactly. It's like massive, like performance art of like this ridiculous spectacle that you won't see anywhere else. And I was hooked, and that's what we used to do. We used to sit together. But her last name was Alton. That's where my first name as a wrestler comes from. Because her name was Frida Alton, and she passed away a couple of months before I debuted. So when Styx asked me what I wanted my name to be, I kind of knew I wanted Thorne because, like, I'm Kevin. Like in real life, and Kevin Thorne was a thing at the time, and I just kind of liked the name Thorne. And I was like, I can take that, but what do I add on the front? And I chose my nana's last name. That's why I'm Alton Thorne.
Yeah, great name as well. And it could have been much worse because I remember when I got started out, I was nearly AK-47, and that's a bad place to be. It's a bad place to be.
Hang on. You were almost AK-47.
I was.
All I'll say to you is I was almost surname McCracken, first name Phil.
Wow. Yeah, and you still ended up landing on Matt Burns, which is like a
slightly less.
Hey, it sticks.
Yeah. Well, nobody forgets it. Nobody ever forgets it.
Ever. So who were you guys then, Alton Thorne, when you were growing up? Who were the guys that you thought, that's what I want to do because of them?
I suppose the first one was probably The Undertaker. That's the first one before, like, I have like full active memory, like I could kind of remember everything that was going on. I know that I was like, I had Undertaker figures, I had Undertaker videos, but in 1996, Mankind debuted, and he was fighting The Undertaker, and suddenly I was like, that's my guy. Like almost immediately, as soon as he came out,
bloke with the mask on, it's him.
That's my guy. And I think over time I've kind of thought about it and thought, why was it him? Of all the big silly characters, why was he and it's because he's the one that was kind of most real, like insecure and kind of sheltered and anguished. And I thought that's more relatable to me than ripping your t-shirt open or, cupping your ear. It was like, I get some of those emotions that he's showing me, like that resonates a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what it is? That's a real character, and it's depth of character that you were drawn to. It's really interesting.
100%. And then he did like the interviews with Jim Ross. And in those videos, they start showing like Japanese deathmatch stuff. And I've seen him fall off a ladder into barbed wire, and I'm going, this guy is absolutely crazy. Like he's off his nut, and he's having these matches where he's getting thrown off rings and bashing the back of his head. And I'm like, holy, like this dude is for me. So I started to follow the trail and got into Terry Funk massively, and kind of got into Japanese deathmatch to a certain extent, or at least 90s Japanese deathmatch. Used to buy Power Slam magazine because it showed all the pictures of like the Japanese stuff. So Mick Foley kind of opened
Power Slam magazine in the corner shop.
Yeah, they stopped running it a few years ago, but I bought it every single month. And my nan used to keep them. She had a giant pile of them in her shed because I used to read them and give them to her.
I'm big love for Frida Alton.
Oh, definitely. I'm looking at me shelving area right now, just see if I can see it. One hand, because I actually got one not too far from where I am right now. Literally.
Yeah. Well, it was a great magazine because it kind of opened the doors. Like Mick Foley kind of slightly jarred it open, and then Power Slam kind of burst it open. And I was like, okay, so wrestling doesn't just happen in WWF then. Like it's everywhere. Like there's a massive scene for it in Japan. There's a massive scene for it in the UK. It's kind of dying off at that point, but I was aware that it had been around and it had been a big thing. That's it. That's how, like, a combination of my mom, my nan, and my granddad kind of brought me to loving it and then being prepped for it, and that's how I became a wrestler.
Okay, let's skip forward a little bit then. So you've done the judo bit, you've done a bit of AMDRAM, amateur dramatics, You've done a bit of wrestling training.
Some paid professional acting as well.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
absolutely. That's really interesting. We might come back to that in a minute. But you do your wrestling training, or a bit of, and you're into your first match, right? So what do you remember about that? Absolute chaos, well-oiled plan, bit of both?
My first match after I completed training, or my first match in training, because they were both
first match in front of the crowd, I suppose, is what I'm asking about.
Yeah.
So that actually, watching it back, I was quite happy with it. And I think my second match was the one where it all went to shit. But the first match was kind of it was a debut show, so everybody on it was debuting, because House of Pain had like a big bunch of people would turn up around the same time and get to a similar point. And Styx was like, I've kind of got a show here, like we could do a debut show. And they actually make that quite a regular thing now, but we were the first group of people to do it. And in that group was like Grayson Clay and Harley Harris and Kyle Kingsley and lots of people that still do bits. The guy that I wrestled was Lucas Archer, who did like What Culture and like actually had a good career until he got injured, hurt his hip, and couldn't keep going. But we were the main event, and we had I think we had 15 minutes, and it went about as well as a debut could have done. Like, I watch it back and I think not a lot of experience, clearly both green, but like everything clicked together quite well. We were both quite vocal for our first match, like not too bad. Then in the second match, I had a tag match in front of 30 people and absolutely stank the whole fucking place out. Like, gave 30 people the most miserable night of their life, probably. So, swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
Kyle's been giving people the most miserable night of their life for a long time. I wouldn't want to give
Hey, you leave my cousin out of this.
Yeah, so Matt Burns, to be fair. Okay, so wrestling's tough. What was the biggest wake-up call for you when you did start training and wrestling?
I didn't realise how hard it was to do the multitasking that it takes to do in wrestling, right? Because I've never been the fittest guy in the world. But you don't realise how hard it is to be running and screaming and throwing yourself on the floor, getting back up and screaming again. And the hardest part about pro wrestling that I don't think people realise until they start training is the matches get more complex as they get towards the end. Like, you do the hardest stuff and the biggest moves and the heaviest stuff at the end of the match, and that's when you're most tired. So if you're a big guy like me, you soon quickly learn that there's a different level of fitness to professional wrestling, and you've either got to get fitter or change the way that you wrestle, or figure a way around it. Now, I've kind of done both, in that I think I'm pretty fit for a big guy. Like, I have to do regular main events, so like I've got a certain level of fitness, but I've also found ways around it. Like, I think weapons, as much as, like, obviously because of Foley and because of deathmatch, I was always leaning that way anyway, but I think they do give you a little bit of extra time in a match, like hold it up and give it a whirl before you sell it, so you can take a little bit more of a breath. So like, I can do a half-hour, 40-minute death match where I'll probably be starting to struggle in a 20-minute like full-on singles. So yeah, I think that's it really. Like, it's much more difficult than people realize. There's a performance aspect, there's the memory aspect, or the improvisation aspect. You throw all these different things into a big pot, and it's like there's no other performance that requires that much from you. Like, nothing else. Acting, you slip in and out of the scene, you get another take. Sport, it's different, isn't it? Like, you know what's required of you. The game plan's mapped out. It either works or it doesn't. Like, wrestling, there's so many intangibles and so many things that can go wrong and so many things that can change in a second, And it's like, you've got to be quick off the mark and still fit enough to carry it through. Yeah, wrestling's hella complicated. It's a difficult thing to manage.
With bumps, it's really difficult. Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's the getting back up. That's the killer. The getting back up.
I know, that's why you call most of your matches about 5 minutes early.
Let's not tell everyone. Oh dear, we've given away some secrets there. There's always a what the hell am I doing moment, right? I'm having one right now. in your career so far,
Mhm.
have you had one, and what pulled you through?
So, right, ask the question again so that I can kind of go on. Say it again.
Yeah, so give you some time to think about it. So, there's always a "what the hell am I doing" moment.
That's why I'm struggling with it. That's why I'm struggling, because I think I probably have one of those every match at the moment, right?
Okay.
Because, like, there's always a new weapon that somebody's brought. Like, a couple of months ago, it was a bed of nails. Like, using a bed of nails for the first time, and I was thinking, what the fuck am I doing with my life at that point? And then a stapler. I was getting notes stapled to my head, and I was thinking, what the fuck am I doing with my life at that point? And a Kenzan. Do you know what a Kenzan is?
No.
Little circular thing. They use it in Japan and China, I think, for plant pots. And it's just got loads of little spikes on it, and people slam it into your head. Like, all of these things, I was thinking, what the hell am I doing with it? But I think the end result, in my opinion, is worth it. Because I think your body is kind of like a tool, right? It's a tool for your brain to use. And sometimes, like, certain types of art require sacrifice to do right. Now, I think if you're reenacting a violent fight, then it needs to look violent, and it needs to, I think blood is an important aspect to that. I think that's why WWE are bringing blading back a little bit, because it signifies like pain and struggle and violence. And I think sometimes to tell that story in a meaningful way that connects with people, that sometimes you've got to make those kind of sacrifices. Now, some of them are stupid. Like, I don't recommend taking loads of chair shots to the head and giving yourself brain damage and concussion and stuff, because we know what that leads to. But in terms of like a cut that I know is going to clean up nicely and be gone in a few weeks' time, it's just worth the sacrifice, I think.
Okay. And before we move on to some further questions, I have got one from a Matthew Rodriguez. He asks, would you love to do a show in Mania week in the future, and who are you picking to face you in a death match?
I would like to do a show in Mania week. I know a lot of the UK deathmatch guys going over to America this time to do some Rise shows and stuff. And I think the main reason that I haven't done that is because it's Rise that do them, and Rise is probably the only like big deathmatch company in the country that I don't really work for that often. So it's just kind of fallen. Just doesn't fall right for me. However, there have been talks this year with a couple of companies that have shown a little bit of interest, so it's not out of the realms of possibility that I'll be doing America in the near future. But I kind of get the impression, weirdly, that people want that for me more than I want it myself, to a certain extent, because I'm quite scared of the idea. Like, I don't like traveling very much. I don't like flying. I've got ADHD, so sitting and waiting for things is a struggle. And I know that, like, until I was in the ring, I'd find it quite hard to do.
Yeah.
And being away from my family and all that kind of stuff. So, but the second I got my gear on and I was ready to go, all of that would be forgotten. It'd be the greatest moment of my life, right? But the build up to it's quite extreme. So when fans are always like, when are you going to go to America? You deserve to be doing like what these other guys are doing. Part of me is always like, I'm a little bit reserved about it. I haven't chased it that much. Like, there's a couple of messages that have been exchanged, but I've not been going to companies and asking too much because I'm just a little bit nervous about the prospect.
Yeah.
Is that weird? Should I be like?
No, I don't think so.
To some degree, some people might think it's weird, but when you sit down and think about the actual concept of it, you'd be going to another country that you're not used to. Potentially, you got to find your own ground there to get your foothold in, and then sort of build yourself up in another area, which could be like almost like another side of the industry as well.
So it's like an English-born Premier League footballer who's interesting or who's had interest from going to play in Saudi, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think the one advantage that we do have is that there's quite a lot of crossover between American and British deathmatch wrestlers at the moment, right? So they're kind of familiar with our scene, we're kind of familiar with theirs, because they're all on a streaming platform called IWTV, which is like the main hub for indie deathmatch. So guys kind of watch each other's shit to a certain extent. Like a lot of the American guys knew Kumite because of the outside setting in Derby with like the brick wall, and it just looks badass. And I've been told that a lot of the American guys said like it's one of the coolest places they've seen for a wrestling show. So I know that there's kind of, they're already familiar with my work to a certain extent. So I don't think it would be like jumping into a whole new pool, but only some of them are going to be familiar. You know, it's not like everybody's going to be up to date with everything. There'll be enough familiarity there so I wouldn't feel like a complete fish out of water.
Yeah, I get what you mean. But one thing I wanted to, with that being said, you know, this will like lead into like the next segment of the questions that we've got is what sort of made you make that transition from regular standard wrestler into that deathmatch wrestler?
I think actually you guys played a little part in that, right? Because as I was coming through, the first company that booked me outside of my home company, House of Pain, which runs trainee shows rather than full shows, was United in Stoke. So you guys were kind of like the first people in wrestling that I was around to any great extent outside of the school. And the guy that was booking at the time, I think his name was Daniel. Yeah, it's Daniel. He took a liking to me after Birchall brought me in for a rumble. And then ever since then, I was used every month by United. I was there for like 8-9 years, like pretty much barely missing a month. And it got to the point where I was familiar enough to the crowd and I was over enough so that the guys like you, Scott, would say to me, well, what kind of thing do you want to do next? Like, where do you want to head? And what I wanted to do was hardcore wrestling. So I'd often say, can we have a feud which builds up to like this match? Can I do this with Tommy Taylor? Can I do this street fight? So I always kind of knew that what I wanted to do was be one of the best hardcore wrestlers in the country. Like that was always my aim. And I kind of, United and myself was kind of I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine situation where they brought me in and I did my thing and they gave me the opportunity to try stuff that I wanted to use later on in my career. So like it was from the start, it was kind of already there, and you guys kind of helped me to be able to practice and to learn what works in front of a crowd and learn how to use weapons safely and all that kind of stuff. But as soon as like I was asked if I wanted to do a deathmatch, the answer was yes. I don't think I'd ever thought to myself, you're going to be a deathmatch wrestler, because I didn't think there was really a scene for it in this country for a hell of a long time. Rise started doing some shows like 5 years ago, but I wasn't like before that. When I broke in, deathmatch wasn't a thing in this country at all. So that wasn't the thought, but the thought was always I want to be a hardcore wrestler, and you guys kind of helped me with that.
What's really interesting is Stoke-on-Trent in particular does have a history in these sort of death match matches. There was a promotion actually that sort of we took over the venue actually at United.
Yeah, Bids, right?
The old Bids venue.
Yeah, the old Bids venue. Yeah,
used to be for the GBH promotion at the time that did nothing but hardcore and death matches, and we were trained by the guy. In fact, initially me and Matt Burns, we were trained by the guy that ran GBH.
Yeah.
Well, Iceman used to wrestle there.
Yeah, I actually know where Iceman.
This is why when I first went to Bids, because I was kind of familiar with like the hardcore scene as it had been in this country. When I did a bit of research when I broke in to see what I could find, and it was like Iceman and North Herman having hardcore matches all over the place, right? So I kind of followed the trail of Iceman a few years ago on Cage Match and saw that he'd done loads of shows in the bids. I was like, I used to wrestle there.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's the biggest dump I've ever wrestled in, but I actually really liked the place, you know? Like, for some reason, it had this kind of gritty charm. Like, the crowd were quite hard to work out, but once you'd figured them out, they'd bite for everything. I quite enjoyed bids, personally.
I'm still trying to figure out a back to bids special show.
Didn't it burn down?
Yeah, no. I'm still trying to figure it out.
No, that wasn't.
Probably let's go to the next question.
But anyway, let's move on to the next question, which is: people see the blood, but they don't see the art. What's the biggest misconception about deathmatch wrestling?
That it's more stupid than normal wrestling. I think, right. So, to a certain extent, because the second you start involving glass and stuff like that, you're involving something unpredictable that can cause damage, right? Yeah. And even death. So that you obviously, I can understand the argument that some people make about wrestling is supposed to be you're working together to not hurt each other and put on a show as if you are hurting each other. So then involving things that do hurt you is kind of counterproductive to professional wrestling. I get the argument, I do, but I don't think it's, when you look at what we put our bodies through as standard professional wrestlers, I think it's just not true. Like, I know more people that have injured themselves doing up and overs in training and twisted their knee than I do that have been put out of death matches for periods of time because of injuries through death matches. Like, I know more people that have not been caught on a dive and hurt themselves than's had to sit out because they took a tube. You know, I think there's the thing that we do is a high risk scenario from every single level. And I think you can do deathmatch in a way that minimizes risk in the same way that you learn how to do moves, which minimizes risks. So I think sometimes the mentality that people have about deathmatch wrestling is a little bit blinded by the idea that the thing that they like is stupid and people laugh at it because it's men fighting in pants, and they want their version of wrestling to be taken more seriously than a different version of wrestling. But it's all silly. It's all fake. So I kind of go, I love both forms of wrestling. I love all forms of wrestling. I just think people misunderstand why people love deathmatch wrestling. A lot of the fans of deathmatch wrestling aren't even really fans of professional wrestling. They don't go to professional wrestling shows anymore. They stick to deathmatch shows. It's almost like a subgenre. And it's the same way that people don't understand black metal and death metal. They think it's just noise. That's kind of what deathmatch is an extreme version of wrestling that turns up the dial in certain aspects. But it's all dangerous. You can get hurt doing any of it. You can get killed doing any of it. As long as you're trying to minimize risk, then I think that's the best any of us can ask for.
No, I can get that because I've seen an individual enter the squared circle. As they entered, they've managed to pull the leg muscle and ended up falling over.
Exactly right. So, every single day that we do wrestling, we're putting our life on the line, or at least in somebody else's hands. Now, the people in deathmatch wrestling in this country are people like Big Fucking Joe, who did the All-Star circuit for years, B.A. Rose, who's still traveling, doing shows all over the place. These are experienced professional wrestlers. They're not just people smacking themselves over the head with shit anymore. Like, that was the biggest insult to like CZW in the early 2000s was it's just fat blokes hitting each other with shit. Maybe it had elements of that. There was still a lot of skilled guys in it, but it's moved so far past that now. It is professional wrestling with a violent aspect, and we try and tell stories in the same way that you would in a normal match.
No, 100%. And one thing I will say is we know that ourselves and all fans love the the holy shit moments, but what's the scariest bump you've ever taken where you thought, oh no, that might be it?
So I was in a match in Scotland last year, and it was the first ever barbed wire match in Scottish history. They took down the ropes and wrapped the ring in barbed wire, and myself and Jack Harrop, who's Iceman's son,
Yeah.
had a main event in that match. Now, he does a spine buster as one of his big moves, and we had a large pane of glass, and he was going to spine bust me through the pane of glass. But the problem is, if you take the rim ropes off, you expose the turnbuckles, right? So in the corner of the ring where we propped up the glass was just the ring. And I think it couldn't have been millimeters away from the back of my head when I took that bump. And I knew going into it that it was an incredibly dangerous bump, and I asked Jack to keep me safe on it. But it was like the second to last thing that happened in the match, and I thought it was important to the story, and I kind of like just went, oh, fuck it, and risked my life for the night. Which I know is a really stupid thing to do, but you know, that match won Match of the Year in Scotland. And it was mentioned in the Wrestling Observer. Like, so I think sometimes it's that Mick Foley thing again, it's risk reward. I thought it's a hell of a bump to take, but I trust Jack. So I just thought, fuck it, let's do it. And if I bang my head, I bang my head. It is what it is. But that's the scariest bump I've ever taken. Like, yeah, I have to show you guys because it's literally, it could not be closer to my head. Seriously.
Send it to us. We'll post it on the socials.
Yeah, and I will say is adrenaline can be a funny thing. Adrenaline can be a funny thing because it can take over.
It does make you do things that you wouldn't do without it. I think adrenaline, like I don't have the same fear that you think I would have going into a match. Like, I have the same kind of attitude towards a match that you guys have towards a match, and that's including death matches.
To be honest with you, I was just about to ask you, mentally, how do you prepare for stepping into a match where you're going to be coming out looking like, out of a crime scene or something like that?
You just can't prepare because you don't know what a lot of the things are going to feel like until you've taken them anyway. Like, so how do you mentally prepare for it? You just have to kind of find a place of zen. You can't let emotions rule you because you've still got to go out and do a professional job, because being a professional wrestler is learning how to keep yourself safe in dangerous situations, right? Like, so if I'm getting all flustered and worried, like, have you seen the clip of David Arquette in a match with Nick Gage?
Yes.
And he gets his neck slightly sliced, and he turns Nick Gage around and grabs him. Well, David Arquette got his neck slightly sliced because he's too jerky. He's nervous and he's not being still enough. So every time Nick Gage has got something sharp next to him, he's moving around, right? And if you go into death matches with that kind of fear, then that's what happened. That's why that match ended quick, because he got nicked by something and had to leave because he was scared for his life, Yeah. So that's how you prepare. You just stay as calm as humanly possible, because you don't know how it's going to feel until you're in there. You just got to get through it.
Yeah, it's sort of a bit like a good example of this is with certain maneuvers or taking certain landings. If you're fully rigid and and everything, you're going to end up being more hit or break something. Whereas if you're more relaxed and everything, you're less likely have more of a rougher impact and be more
exactly.
Yeah. So, with that being also added on, who's been your toughest opponent who's giving you the absolute worst or best beating of your life?
Oh, Jesus, I've taken some beatings. I have taken some absolute
I will say I've actually seen some of the beatings you've taken. I have seen some of the beatings you've taken, especially in Kumite. I've seen.
I'm pretty sure he worked Rich Lee's at some point as well.
Oh yeah, I took a thrashing from the crowd in that match. Gary J from America chops harder than any man I've ever had chop me, and left huge handprints on my chest for about a month afterwards. The only guy that has even come close to chopping me that hard is Isaac North, and that was only a couple of weeks ago. He's getting around a lot at the moment. He does a lot of shows, and he's got giant fucking hands, and
he's not small. I can vouch for that, because I've actually met him. He is not a small dude. I'm just netting to myself. His hand could probably cover my face.
seriously, mate, I felt my soul fly out of my back. Like, it was brutal. Like, in death matches, I've been thrashed around and beaten up a lot, but like it's when you're in a normal match and somebody really kicks the shit out of you that you really know about it. Gabe Kidd in a match kicked me in the back once so hard that if I had dentures, they'd have flown into the fourth row. Like
Note to self: avoid Gabe Kidd.
it shouldn't be too hard. It's in Japan most of the time.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be back in United anytime soon, Matt Baines. I wouldn't worry too much about it.
I'm just thinking of other promotions. That's all I'm thinking, just in case.
A lot of the thrashings you take in death matches, you're kind of aware that you're going to take them, so you're prepped for them. Nothing can prep you for a Gary J chop. Like that thing will leave an imprint in your soul as well as it'll leave an imprint on your chest.
For me, if you want, the only comparison I've got for hardest chop was from a gentleman by the name of 5-star Mark Belton. He could somehow hit you with a chop, regardless of if you're wearing something on your chest. You would feel it rise up and literally. It's almost like I sat there and thought to myself, "Am I need to go to the hospital because I'm wondering if I'm having a mild heart attack?"
Mate, I wear a singlet and a Hellbound t-shirt, and Isaac North still like absolutely like tore my chest up. Like, but I guess as long as it sounds good, I'm kind of okay with it.
It's all good, yeah. It's fine. But let's talk about the aftermath when the adrenaline wears off and you're sat in the locker room covered in your blood. What's that come down like?
It's kind of weird with deathmatch because you kind of have a come down, but then your phone starts blowing up because these days at deathmatches, people take footage of like high impact spots, and they very quickly start bouncing around like Instagram. Like there's a few sites on Facebook that do deathmatch clips. So I'll get home and I'll start to be kind of coming out of it, and then suddenly my phone will start going off. I'll have 200 notifications in an hour or whatever, and it gets gradually more and more as the days go on. So you kind of, it's weird. I have to get to a point sometimes where I have to put my phone to one side for a while because otherwise you never quite come down. And if you've got work on a Monday morning, like you can't still be in wrestling mode from Saturday. So I kind of have to put my phone in a drawer and watch some Squid Game or something, like just take my mind off wrestling for a bit. It can be quite it can be quite all-consuming after a death match for at least 3 or 4 days.
No, understandable. And what about moments? What's the one deathmatch moment that you'll tell your grandkids about one day?
I've had a couple of entrances that I got to do where I did the Mick Foley cross wrapped in barbed wire thing. I actually power bombed Clint Margera through a giant crucifix. The crucifix bomb through a crucifix. I think that's pretty fucking cool. I think I'll tell him about that.
Brilliant.
But in terms of something that makes me sound really hard, I once had B.A. Rose on my back with barbed wire wrapped around my neck, and I fell off a platform through a sheet of glass onto a concrete floor with B.A. Rose still on my back choking me with barbed wire. That's pretty insane. I think I'll tell him about that one as well. That makes me sound pretty cool.
Well, to be honest with you, you're actually one of the first individuals who I knew went to did a death match with no ring.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, they're not. I mean, it's much easier to do a death match without a ring than it is a normal match. Yeah. So like you find ways around it because obviously you can't be like, I'm not going to be bumping and feeding for anybody on a concrete floor, but you got a lot more tools at your disposal. So they're probably most of these no ring death matches aren't the longest matches in the world. You know, they're about 12 minutes of like beating the fuck out of each other and then go home kind of thing.
Well,
but they're interested. It changes your perspective on wrestling and how to work a crowd and stuff, because you don't have the tools at your disposal that you used to having. So you've got to find other ways to connect.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting.
And to add on to that, you know, because if I'm not mistaken, the first ever match of Kumite, which was a no-ring death match, is actually on YouTube to watch for everyone to see, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct, but I would be shot by Johnny Concrete if I didn't mention that actually that match is the second match in Kumite history, because Johnny Concrete and Flex Buffington had a comedy match before us that wasn't recorded, which included a giant inflatable cock. So, second match, Johnny Concrete is the only undefeated person in Kumite history as well, I think. So
big shout out to Johnny Concrete. I love
there you
that
go.
guy.
Yeah, there we go. But straight away, even so, it's still history making. Either way, it was the first. It was the first show I'd actually heard of where there was no ring being involved, and I sat there, thought to myself, "How's it going to work?" And I remember just watching it, and it's weird because I couldn't take my eyes off it. It was like, it was just, I was just looking at it like, this isn't the usual thing. And I was like, but I couldn't look away.
Reminds me of a really intense version of like, you know, the APA used to do like the brawls in like the local.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of something like that, but a much more extreme version. So for me, mate, you've built a reputation in the deathmatch scene now, you know, and on the UK scene in general, I think. What is next for you? What's next for Alton Thorne?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm 100% not sure. Like some days I think I'm 38 now. I've been taking bumps every day, every weekend for so long. Like before I was doing wrestling, I was doing judo. So I was taking bumps then as well, right? So I've been landing on my back for 22 years now or something like that, and the cumulative bumps tally is a bit high. So sometimes I think to myself, I don't know how much longer I've got left, maybe a couple of years like doing it at this level, and then I think to myself, it's going better than it's ever gone before at the moment. So it's very hard to kind of figure out where I stand with it, right? I would like to do at least one show in America before I'm done. Like, just to say I'd done it because I could tick it off the bucket list. I don't think I'm going to be doing like a Drew Parker American tour anytime soon, but I would like to do it to say I'd done it. But other than that, my main interest, and it has been for a long time, is cultivating a scene in the UK that will last. Right, that's like, I want the deathmatch scene in the UK to have people coming through and have a few good places that are solid and run regularly and, you know, make a bit of money so that there's stuff for people in the future. Because we've only really just started to have a scene here at all, and it's going really fucking well. And I would like there to be a next generation and a next generation, because it's something cool for the fans of that style wrestling in this area, because they've just never had access to it before, and now there's 4 or 5 companies that are running it, you know, all with quality wrestlers. So I'd like there to be a sustainable deathmatch wrestling scene by the time I finish. That's it, really. That's my goal.
It's a movement, right? Got to keep it going.
100%.
Do you ever see yourself stepping away from this hardcore style?
No, in fact, I've just stepped further into it. Like, I've just cut out a lot of my family show bookings to kind of stick more to the hardcore stuff. And the reason for that is because I've done family shows for a decade. I love doing family shows. You guys have seen me on family shows. You know how much I enjoy it, right? Like, I love that connection, especially in like working class towns where the kids haven't got much to do to entertain themselves, and the mums bring them to a show once a month and they get to scream and shout. I think it's important. I'm a working class lad. I would have loved something like that in my area because we didn't have a lot of money, you know. So those shows, I do love them, and I still do House of Pain, but it's a lot of toll on my body. Like, it's a lot of extra wear and tear, and I know that I'm really good at this stuff. Like, I know that this is where I can make a real imprint in wrestling, or where I can do something that like is different or add something to the culture. So I'd rather do the thing that I'm really good at and like make a proper go of it, and save my body for those big bumps when they come. So I've kind of put a few family shows aside, but I still do sometimes. If a friend asks me, or if the angle that they've got planned for me is really good or whatever, then I'll think about it. But no, I'm digging in deeper. I'm going till the wheels fall off.
Cool. Okay, so digging in deeper, which links nicely into my next question, or part one of my next question, because it's a two-parter. Me and Matthew Rodriguez want to know. So part one is dream opponents, anywhere, anyone, anytime. Who are you stepping in the ring with? And then Matthew's got a more specific version. He wants to know which AEW lady you would like to wrestle in an intergender death match.
I would like to wrestle Abaddon from AEW, because she's got a spooky vibe going on. I think we could, there'll be a good connection there. She's a bit like Felony, who broke me in. So a girl called Felony, who's in the Nottingham area, that did a very similar gimmick. So like, I've been around that kind of thing. I could do that. In terms of dream opponents, it's kind of weird, because like I was saying for years that Matt Tremont was my main dream opponent, because he's like done everything in deathmatch, and I wrestled him last year. So it's like, holy crap! I'm like, who do I say is my dream opponent now?
Well,
like,
let me rephrase: anyone, anytime, retired, alive, dead. This is a much bigger question.
Oh, Funk.
Oh.
I would like a proper brawl with like 89 era Funk, where he's still young and throwing bombs and tearing up like Japanese arenas and stuff. Like, if I could wrestle one person ever, I would like to be. When I got to wrestle Joel Bateman, who's like the biggest deathmatch wrestler in Australia last year, I kind of like let him tell me like what he thinks my character would do, because he's been wrestling for so long, like 22 years. There's like, okay, what would you do if you were me? And he gave me ideas that I can use in death matches later down the line for what somebody of my size and stature would be. And I think wrestling Terry Funk in that kind of scenario, you'd learn so much, like how to work a crowd, how to sell, like the greatest seller of all time, probably, right? So in terms of like my favorite wrestler, in terms of a massive learning curve, it'd be him.
Terry Funk. Wowzer. Do you know what? I'd have had money on you saying Mick Foley, so Terry Funk is a great shout.
I thought it was going to be either one. It was. I knew it was one or the other.
Yeah. Mick Foley is my favorite wrestler. I think Terry Funk's the greatest wrestler. I've got a lot. Like, I love Kenta Kobashi and Misawa, like that era of Japanese wrestling. I love a lot of WWF stuff down the years and WWE. But like those two are like the two that I always come back to. If I'm comfort watching wrestling, it'll be some Funk stuff. If I'm like trying to think of ideas for an upcoming match, I might throw on an old Foley that people haven't seen in a long time and see if he's done anything that I can kind of, pick ideas up from. So they'll always be like the two biggest inspirations in wrestling to me. And if I had to pick one or the other, I'd rather work with a person that I think is the best ever, so that I could get the most out of it.
Yeah. Okay, so that's you getting advice from who you think is the best wrestler ever. But if you could go back and give rookie Alton Thorne some advice, what would you say?
Cut promos. Cut promos straight away. Don't listen to people that are telling you that nobody cares about stuff that's happening on the internet. Nobody cares about like your character when you're only 6 months in. Start cutting promos straight away, because they helped me massively in the last few years. And I always knew that I'd be quite good at them. But my confidence was a little bit knocked by some of the people in Nottingham who told me like, nobody watches the online stuff. Why are you bothering? Right? it might have been true at that time, but it's certainly not true now. And the only way you get people watching the online stuff is to keep pumping out material anyway, right? So what I would have told myself straight away is play to your strengths. Don't let people tell you not to bump because you're big. Find ways to bump despite the fact that you're big, and show off that skill. Talk, like put videos out there, show off that skill, because it might have got me moving a little bit quicker. Oh, and also just have fun. Don't take it too seriously, right? Like it is important, and it does mean something, and there is an element where you have to, like, the crowd have paid money, you've got to give them a performance. But if you're not enjoying it, then you bring the other people around you down, and you're not a nice person to be around, then people don't want to work with you, and you start resenting wrestling. Or if you focus too much on your body, like, it's quite difficult being a big guy in a very body conscious business, right? Like, I'm stood next to people all the time that are constantly in the gym. I don't like the bloody gym. Like, so it could be that I get in my head, but I've told myself, don't worry about that shit. Just enjoy wrestling, because it doesn't last forever. And the more you enjoy it, the more the crowd come with you, and the more the people want to work with you. So that's the advice I'd give.
That is spot on, and the same advice I would give anyone.
Yeah,
just gotta make it fun. It's contagious.
It's solid advice, because at the same time, like you said, with the promo work straight away as well, that's something that is very crucial that a lot of people don't always grasp, and they don't realize that, or just speaking to a camera and everything can be something that can pull somebody into a match.
Yeah.
Just as much as the match itself, because it's telling that story. And
absolutely.
And at the same time, with you saying having fun, the reason why I think that's intricate is because, like you said, if you're not enjoying it, then others will see that you're not enjoying it, and they'll sit there and think, "Oh, why is he doing something that he's not enjoying?"
Yeah, 100%. And right. I've seen people get resentful towards wrestling, and it's such a shame, because it can be so much fun if you just enjoy yourself and try your best.
You've got to remember why you're here.
100%.
Right. 3 words, Alton Thorne. Sum up your wrestling journey so far in 3 words for me.
Painful. Wild ride. There you go. A painful, wild ride. I've had the time of my life doing it, but it sucked at times. When you're trying to get a staple out of your forehead for 20 minutes, you kind of go, oh, man. But yeah, it's the most counterculture thing I've ever done. It's probably the coolest thing I've ever been involved in. So it's been a wild ride, but it's had its moments.
That I'm sure it's have. But here's a question for you, and it's going to lead into the next segment, if you will. We know you've wrestled with all sorts of weapons, but have you wrestled with a shovel?
What the hell just happened?
Now, dearly beloved, we're gathered here today for our segment called Buried Alive.
Buried Alive, yeah. This is our version of Room 101. It's something we do on the podcast normally, Alton Thorne, but we thought we'd bring it in for this interview. And basically what we want you to do is, I did speak to you about this before the interview, but nominate something that you absolutely hate in wrestling that you would like to be buried for all time, never to see the light of day again. And if me and Matt agree with you, then it will get buried.
Well, it took me 5 seconds to think of this when you mentioned it the other day. I was like, that's what I'm using. The phrase or the sentence or the joke, hot dog and a handshake, and any variation of it. Right? He's only doing this for 30 quid and half a lager. It's the same fucking joke over and over again that I've seen on every single video that's got anything to do with deathmatch for a decade, and I'm so fucking bored of it, right? Like, firstly, I get paid pretty well for deathmatch. Like, probably still not as well as like people would expect for like it's still professional wrestling, but I'm doing all right. I'm not doing it because I get a handshake or a hand job or any of the other descriptors. Like, I'm doing it for love and for passion, and because lots and lots of people enjoy it. So you can take that line and shove it every 101 or up where the sun, wherever you want to shove it. Just get rid of it. It pisses me off.
I'm just going to say it. Scott, I'm getting the shovel already.
Yeah, get it buried, mate. Well, I agree. And do you know what? It's interesting because some of these jokes that I hear about wrestling are brilliant. You know, I know a ref who's a 15-year vet and he's not saved one animal. But this one in particular really grinds my gears as well. Hot dog and a handshake, bury that guy.
It's just come up with a new line, like say something original, take the piss or something. It's just so fucking boring and unoriginal. I'm just done with it. And I also always think, what have you done? What has this person that is making this comment actually contributed to any kind of like you're saying it from behind the computer? Go do something. Like, you've wasted 30 seconds of your life moaning about something I've done. Go achieve something. Anyway.
Right, let's whiz through these comments, Matt, before you ask your last question. Matthew Rodriguez, I would love to see Mariah May in a death match. I don't think I would, actually, Matthew, but thanks for your comment. We also got a, hey, guys, hey, Alton, from Matthew Rodriguez. And I think that is it for comments and questions. Matt, what's your last question?
So, of course, with that, so Alton Thorne, where's the best place for people to follow you on social media?
So I don't really use Facebook anymore. I'm on X at Alton Thorne, and I'm on Instagram, which is probably the best place to find me, at Alton Thorne Wrestling.
And with that all being said and done, that's a wrap for this interview. I'm going to have to say thank you for joining us and Alton Thorne, and we'd like to say a massive thank you to Alton Thorne for being here. We do appreciate it, and we hope that everyone who's been listening in and yourself have had as much fun as we have.
I have. Cheers, guys.
Good. If you want more of The Burning Truth, keep the conversation going with us on social media. We're everywhere at The Burning Truth. We're also on Twitter and Bluesky at TBT Live UK. Instagram, it's The Burning Truth. Facebook, The Burning Truth. And, of course, the YouTube channel, if you're watching us on there right now, The Burning Truth 251 for full episodes, reactions, and exclusive content.
And don't forget to smash body slam and put the chokehold on the like button and subscribe, and drop us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Every like, sub, comment helps us build an even bigger community of wrestling fans, and we couldn't do it without you.
And here's something huge. You can head over to theburningtruthuk.com right now for breaking wrestling news, updates, blogs, and check out the brand new merch store. We've got t-shirts, mugs, and much more coming soon to help you rep The Burning Truth wherever you go. Trust me, you don't want to miss these killer designs and killer deals, baby.
That is true. But until next time, stay fired up, stay passionate, and remember, DFTBA. And in case you don't know what that means, it means don't forget to be awesome.